I get a little excited when people tell me they like the idea of a front yard without lawn. What I believe landscape architecture and landscape design is all about is creating useful spaces. And I like to create useful spaces in individual gardens. Taking out a lawn gives you lots of opportunity for creating useful spaces because you ended up with this big open space that you don't want to just walk through to get to the front door. We want to make it useful and usable. If gardens are for people, we need to have usable spaces within them where people can make their lives better. This remodel that we did is an interesting one because it had a very traditional landscape in front of it, like you would very often see in front of a new house that's just built. A big lawn, a walk that goes right to the front door. There's a lot of downsides to a lawn. They require a lot of water and a lot of maintenance, and they're hard to keep looking at their best, and if they're not looking at their best, it kind of spoils the whole yard. I like this idea of changing the way we think about front gardens, trying to expand their use, have little courtyards, places that you sit, and have alternatives to lawn that are lower maintenance, easy to take care of, and look good all the time. Hi, I'm John Valentino, and I'm here with my Vice President Chip Valentino. Every garden is unique, and we try to make it fit the needs and the vision of the owners. So no garden is going to represent exactly what you want, but we have a lot of concepts in this garden that I think you could build on to apply to your own garden. And that's what Chip and I are going to present to you today, is these ideas of how to make useful, attractive gardens. In this case, we're in California, and I like the fact that these owners were very much into trying to come up with something low in water use and high in usefulness. Usually the owners will show us pictures of gardens they like, and they'll say, we want something like this. In this case, the owner had this really neat picture from the cover of a Restoration Hardware catalog. And they said, we want our front yard to look just like this. I like the fact that we could build on this picture and say, well, what goes with this photo from Restoration Hardware is a water-efficient garden that's relatively sparsely planted, with some useful spaces where we'll have benches with a fountain that goes with olives. In this case, they happen to have a fountain that they really liked in their backyard that they didn't want in their backyard. They wanted something that could kind of take care of itself, and by having these fairly large expanses of gravel and olives and paving, we've created that where it looks great, and yet we don't have to be out babying any plants or, making sure the azaleas have enough water, because there are no azaleas, and the only plants here are tough things like lantana, salvia, rosemary. Our task was to find olives that looked like the olives in the Restoration Hardware cover. We bought 5 of them, and then one of them was already here that had a good amount of character. So you'll see these trunks have a lot of character. And they're really pretty spectacular. As we're here underneath, it gives you a special feeling, and trees can do that. As most of you know that would watch a video like this, trees make places special. I like to say trees are the oldest living thing on earth, the biggest living thing on earth, and the tallest living thing on earth. And that wonder of trees, if you use them in your gardens, can bring a wonder to your garden. And I think these olives really do it here. In this case, it was easy because we had a picture. We want our yard to look exactly like this. We knew we had to use olive trees, but normally tree selection would be more of a way of defining what's important to you. If you're trying to shade the southern sun, you're going to use a different shaped and sized tree than if you're shading the western sun. Trees evoke certain images. As you can see, these evoke a very powerful, rugged, maybe even old world image. Trees evoke certain feelings, so you're going to match those feelings to the tree you pick, and then you're going to decide how big you want it, if you want it to have flowers, or if you want it to have fall color, or you want it to be evergreen. You put in all these criteria that allow you to narrow down the selection process. So you can hear our fountain. That's why our customers can't sleep at night. So we have it go off automatically. It is a little loud, but I kind of like the space. Really nice space made by the fountain, the wall, the simple planting, and the benches. And the benches are really appropriate to be near these olives. They're kind of a rustic restoration hardware bench that they call stone, actually made out of concrete, but stone-like looking, and really appropriate for this space. Now on this main walk, we're missing 2 benches, which will be teak benches with backs. We didn't want to use the same bench under the olives. If you look at that space, you'll see that a bench with a back would be very important because it provides a stopping visual point as you look down that walk under the olives. So in selecting plants to fit with a garden like this, I like to look at lists. And so if we establish that it's going to be water efficient, then I'd look at lists of water efficient plants, and that allows you to kind of open up your brain and come up with things. So you would look at lists with the size that you want in mind, whether you want them to be evergreen or bloom, and the emotion that it evokes. It's a combination of the same way you pick out trees, making decisions based on how they function in your garden and how they meet your needs and how they are to maintain. The leading ones in this garden, I'd say, would be the height, the size, which we want to keep everything kind of secondary to these big spectacular olives. This already had Spirea Anthony water. We used that on the other side. Then we used a great screen where we're going to try to screen the neighbor house and landscape with a dwarf Japanese blueberry shrub. We've got salvia and an upright rosemary called Tuscan Blue. And then we've got a limonium. I've got some St. Elmo's fire here, which actually aren't going to stay. When we put the pots in, it's going to be agave. And then we've got some oak leaf hydrangeas, which are closer to the house, and then some existing planting. If you need help with planting design, you can watch some of our other videos. One specifically is about selecting drought-tolerant plants. I love this idea of useful spaces in the garden by creating, special courtyards or just areas to sit and do a range of things. In Thomas Church's book called Gardens Are for People, he talks about creating special spaces for different things that you might do in the garden. Now, Brendan tells me that some of my material is getting old and that I might have said this before, but you can humor me and laugh at it anyhow. Thomas Church said that he looks for spaces to add. Oh, Chip's excited by the some delivery man. So maybe you don't shell your own peas. I don't know very many people that do. So you are going to have to come up with other things that are important in your life, and maybe you like to talk to your neighbor Joe, and a spot under the olive trees would be perfect to do that. So you can obviously tailor this to your own lifestyle, and there's a whole range of things that are very nicely conducted in the garden and facilitated by a garden. I'm a big fan of what I call interactive gardens. We did a video of my front yard that's very interactive because it has a series of paths that lead you throughout the garden and to benches and to fig trees and to different things. I like this idea of encouraging people to walk through the garden, particularly if you can do that in a utilitarian way. So we're not going to just have a maze that goes through the garden. Now we've got a walkway at the driveway that goes to the courtyard, another walkway at the curb and the street, and these two meet in a courtyard. You walk through the garden very easily and pleasantly. If you combine this interactivity with useful spaces, with shading the house, with conserving water, with producing edible food, all of a sudden you've got gardens that are important and are a big part of making our lives better. I think that's what landscaping and gardening should be about. The other thing that's coming still is the walk that goes from the driveway to the entry courtyard will have pots. These pots are from architectural pottery, and in the pots will be agave. Okay. Let's see. I don't think this. Hello.
Hi, is this John?
This is John.
Oh, hi. My name is Jamie, and I'm neighbors with Terry and Tom.
Uh-huh.
And they gave me your telephone number. You did a lovely job in their backyard, and I was hoping to see maybe if I could hire you folks to do mine.
Oh, okay. When you look at that photo, you realize that's the amazing part of that photo is the light on the olive trees. And so it would make sense to pick the most important features and the features that lend themselves to being lit up. And trees really lend themselves to being lit up. So you would do that with whatever you want to feature in your garden. In this case, the fountain we lit with 2 lights and the olive trees with 3 each. And then these Chinese pistache with 1 each. And then we used path lights at strategic positions so that you can kind of see where you're going at night. They're mostly FX, but we used a couple other brands. We were after a certain kind of light that we could recess in that pea gravel. There's a lot of brands. They're all LED, so they're very easy to run. You can put a lot of lights on a line, and then you can control them in a way that they come on at a certain time and go off at a certain time. I like to think I said something interesting here today, and if I did, maybe it was inspirational. If you liked it at all, indicate that by liking, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. We would appreciate it immensely. So a xeriscape or a water-efficient garden, the most important factor is soil quality. You can make plants that aren't real water efficient, pretty darn water efficient if you have lively soil. We used our blend, which has optimized, maximized, nourished biosol. We used our penetrate liquid biotiller. When you're planting big olives, you don't want to dig a big hole and throw a bunch of organic matter in there. And in the case of those big olives, we've got the same texture as the native soil in all of these big excavations that we dug. But then within those excavations, we put our products to make the soil healthy, but not in a way that changes the texture that would create what some call a bathtub effect, where if we used a bunch of organic matter, then it would be hard for water to drain out of those big excavations because the texture and the consistency of the soil is so different from the native soils.